Like so many others, I am a sucker for nostalgia. It's a problem. I know it. You know it. We all understand that we are slaves to our dopamine addiction and our childhood nostalgic attachments. And that being said, it is a weapon, and companies know this, right? This is why we don't get new movies. This is why we get remakes of everything. And this is why, actually, believe it or not, there can be a pretty strong case to be made for buying the Switch 2 if you're on the fence and you are someone such as myself. So, here's what I mean. Me, primarily, I play GameCube, I play a little bit of Wii games, Switch, and mods at this point in life. Every now and then I'll play some games on PC, but for the most part, I play these games from my childhood and from the newer Nintendo Switch era, Switch 1 games. So here's the clever thing about the Switch 2 and a pretty strong marketing tactic. The Switch 2 is basically the best way to play almost all of Nintendo's back catalog. So you've got Nintendo Switch Online, which I have mixed feelings about. You can see my other topic discussion on that for that whole tirade. But just sticking to the facts, NSO exists, right? You can play SNES games, you can play NES games, N64, GBA, and now GameCube games are included in their online subscription. This is not to say that whether or not they will add Wii or Wii U support potentially eventually down the line for NSO. So bottom line is you don't have like every game included, obviously, but you do have a pretty large chunk of Nintendo's library available. And, you know, with the GameCube, that will be forthcoming. But the other thing that's really cool about GameCube Online, these games are actually improved because they have online support. Now, there was LAN connectivity back in the GameCube era, but pretty much no one got to enjoy that, and I was not one of those people. I never connected my GameCube to my friend's GameCube and had a Mario Kart Double Dash party. That didn't happen. It was pretty much always just limited to however many people came over, the four people at max playing the console. So it wasn't really until the Wii when Nintendo started getting into the online game sphere, and they really weren't good at it. And to be honest, they're still not really that good at it. That's one of my questions about the Nintendo Switch Online stuff, is that hopefully their servers will be better and online play will actually work reliably, consistently. That would be nice. But anyway, back to the GameCube thing. You can play GameCube games online. Like, just for the example, Mario Kart Double Dash, or one that's already confirmed, F-Zero can be played online. And then there's the question about these GameCube games that have Game Boy functionality. I remember Wario World. Anybody remember Wario World? That is truly a lost gem. But the thing about Wario World is when you collect all the treasures in a world, you get a micro game for WarioWare. But I never had a Game Boy or WarioWare, so I never got to connect my Game Boy to my GameCube and play those games. So I never really saw or experienced the reward for that. So how is that going to work? Anyway, this is a whole. I'm getting off topic, but the bottom line is you can play GameCube games online. Just think about Smash Bros. Think about all the multiplayer games that you played. Pikmin 2. What if they made the first online? This is probably not going to happen, but what if? Think any game that you played on the GameCube, couch multiplayer, but online with 8 to 16 people or however many they allow. That would be pretty sick. And who knows how far they're going to support that. Also, you've got Switch 2 editions of Switch 1 games, which are going to offer enhanced graphics and in some cases, DLC. In my opinion, the GameCube has the best game lineup. The Switch has a very good game lineup too. It might actually have a better game lineup. I'm not sure. But I go back to the GameCube more. So my two favorite consoles are the GameCube and the Switch. And the Switch 2 is the best way to play both of those games and those consoles. Now, the GameCube is not quite there yet. Like, they've got to release enough games. You know, like, I still got more GameCube games on my shelf than they're going to have on Nintendo Switch Online in a year, probably. But still, that's potential. It's an investment. It's an improved way of playing all of these games that I really enjoy. And that's obviously not to mention the Switch 2 exclusive games, which I am interested in some of them. I'm interested in Mario Kart. I'm interested in Donkey Kong. I might get Metroid Prime 4 on it. I don't know. It's hard to like add up and think about the games that I want to play. Like, I technically never played the Kirby The Forgotten Land on Switch. I'd like to play it. That was one of those games that's just kind of on the backlog that I wouldn't mind playing. Well, there's a Switch 2 upgraded version for it, so maybe I'll get it on Switch 2 when I'm not broke eventually. I don't know. So I guess the bottom line here is, and this is a very clever marketing tactic / just all around good upgrade on the Switch 2, is that it just has everything. You can do all the things. Now, this is kind of like Nintendo backpedaling in one sense, because on the Wii U, they did have the entire back catalog, pretty much. They didn't have GameCube games for some reason, but they had the Virtual Console, which you could buy virtual games, which I have feelings about, but at least you could actually buy them, and you could at least have them locally on your system, and it wasn't contingent upon whether or not the server went down if you can play them. You had those games on your console, and you could buy them outright, and you could actually own them to some degree. So that's pretty cool. And then the Switch came around, and they're like, we're getting rid of Virtual Console, and they were like, everyone was like, why would you do that? That's so stupid. We just want, like, just let us buy the games, just let us have access to the games. And so then Nintendo kind of backpedaled and was like, you know what? You're right. We'll give you NES games with our online service. It's like, who cares about NES games? And then they released SNES games. It's like, okay, like there's some good SNES games, but still, come on. And then they did N64 games, and people were like, okay, I see where this is going. It's only a matter of time. And the GameCube thing online was something that was rumored, and people were thinking about, like, when is it gonna happen? And it's finally happening. So it's great. So yes, Nintendo Switch 2 and the new improved Nintendo Switch Online is basically what they had before, but it's now under the model of a monthly subscription service rather than buying the games outright. Now, I have my suspicions about how much of this was quote-unquote just stupidity on decisions made in the Switch era, like just bad business decisions being made to piss people off and cut people off from their back catalog of games, and how much of this was actually intentional to get people under a new business model that continually extracts money. It could be a financial thing. It could be, other incentives to get people to continue to pay for services that are, nothing. You don't actually own the game. You're just paying for the service. I don't know. I don't want to think about that. But at the same time, I can't not think about that. This is just how I am. It's a problem. Maybe we'll talk more about this. Maybe we'll talk about my problems. Maybe we'll talk more about me having a problem with everything and that being my problem. Anyway, back to happy news. The point is, if I can just live in this world and pretend like I'm not being herded into a cage, the Switch 2 is exciting. It's a long-term investment. It's the best way to enjoy all of these old games. It fully replaces the Switch 1 for me. It will probably not be a day one purchase because I can't afford it. But these things that I mentioned in this episode are pretty big factors for me. They pull a lot of weight for me on this matter. So, what are some things that might make you want to buy the Switch 2? What are things that you're hyped about the Switch 2? Are you concerned, like me, about this move to digitization and not, owning anything? I had a whole other video on that if you're interested in that topic. But yeah, what do you guys think about Switch 2? Are you excited for it? Are you still miffed about prices like I kind of am? I'm a little bit butthurt, frankly. I'm not, like I said, I'm not gonna immediately buy it probably because I can't. I can't. Maybe one day I can. Maybe later this year or something. We'll see. All right. I still struggle with ending videos in case you couldn't tell, so I'm just gonna hit the stop button and turn this thing off right about.